Hello, Mr. Alvarado.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr.
How are
Alvarado.
you?
How are you? I'm good.
Good. I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you. All right. So how are you holding up during this time?
Well, doing the best of it. It's a lot of these Zoom meetings, WebEx
Okay.
sessions. It's going well. There's a lot of issues going on, but that's okay. With a lot of government programs for businesses and folks and stimulus, so we're pretty busy. You would think it would slow down, but it hasn't. Which is a different way of communicating, but that's okay. And in
Awesome.
my job as district director, I get to go out to the district and meet people, businesses, and all that. So it's been kind of different for me because I've been here in my home, not even at the office. So it's okay. How about for you?
That's awesome. I mean, for me, it's been really a peaceful time. I have a way of dealing with things where I just look for solutions. So it hasn't really shaken me up. I just am a type of person who looks for change in any way. So I've just been trying to communicate with people I know, um, help people maintain their peace, and also maintain my peace as well.
So give me a little bit of a background um, about yourself first.
Okay, so I'm from New York. I moved to Austin last year. I lived in the District of Columbia for 4.5 years. I moved
Okay.
to Austin last year. I've been here for a year and 2 months now, actually. So majority of my time has now been in quarantine, but that's okay. But I have worked with mainly Black populations. I've worked overseas in Africa. I got my Master of Arts degree in the University at Albany.
Okay.
So I've been a person who just serves communities.
Okay.
That's who I am.
Servant's heart. That's very good.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay. And currently, what are you a student or currently what are you doing right now, or you just?
No, actually, during this time, I was laid off due to the coronavirus, which is fine. Um, so I've just been busy just working on other things and, applying for different jobs, but also making myself useful in other ways. I also make music, so I've been
Oh
making music
wow.
as well.
So you have a technical background, right? Are you a developer or designer or what? What's your background?
Oh no, my background, my master's was in Africana studies, and my focus, my research, and my independent studies were based on education in developing communities.
Yeah.
So I've taught, I spent most of my time teaching. I was also a case manager. My last
Okay.
job was in higher education, recruiting students for college programs.
Okay. But you came up with you devised a program, is that right?
Well, what I want to share with you today is just
Yeah.
based on what I've known, what I've researched in my life experience. I developed suggestions or solutions. Sorry, the better word is solutions
Okay.
that I would like for Congress member John Carter to bring forth on behalf of the African American community, especially during these times.
Absolutely. I think more so than ever. Um, it's been, yeah, it's been. Let's just say it's been a struggle, right?
Right,
It's been, and it's unfortunate with the recent events for Mr. Floyd because it seems like every stride we make in the community, something like this happens and it puts us back 12 steps or
right,
further back than we were. And then we start doing a self evaluation. Are we really in a better position today than we were a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? You start looking at that and saying, as a society, where are we?
right.
Where have we made any strides? Have we not made any strides? So I think your request, your outreach to him was perfect timing. And it's unfortunate, like I said, that these things have happened recently. And I think the more we can educate, but it's a struggle too, because it's not only education, but it's also changing the way we think, the way we interact with folks. My daughter's best friend, she's African American, and actually she's from Ghana, I think, is a country in Africa.
Hmm.
And they were friends, and that's where they met in high school. And during these recent events, and even when they both attended A&M University in College Station and Bradine, when I would speak to her, when I would go visit them, I would ask her, "How do you feel?" And she goes, "Well, not really comfortable, because the percentage of African Americans there is very small. So she would join a society just to fit in and feel comfortable. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's difficult. It is difficult. And my daughter's Hispanic, so it's almost, yeah. It's, you want to fit in, and it's just it is a struggle. I'll say that.
Right.
Uh, but again, the strides that we have made, I think and I know our country is relatively young, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be so far ahead with everything that, how we feel towards one another as a society, things holding us back, whether it be economic, social, anything. When we
Yes.
talk about housing, when we talk about just basic necessities, it's really eye opening to see that. But
Right.
so I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Go ahead and go ahead and present now, or go ahead.
Well, thank you for your honest truth. And so right now I want to just give you my honest truth. I do have a letter that I wrote to the office of Congressman John Carter. However, I just prepared a speech that's just a few minutes long, little over 6 minutes, but it really is passionate and it speaks to exactly what I talked about in the letter. So
Okay.
I would just like to read that to you, and then we can have a dialogue, and you can ask questions and I can ask questions as well, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. So again, my name is Ndidiamaka Adeze Ifeanwa Wakalu, daughter of an African American mom and an African dad. I have a Master of Arts degree in Africana Studies, where I performed exceptionally well and served African American populations, as well as taught overseas in Africa, for which I was generously rewarded. With all my experience, research, and education, I am first a Black woman in America, non-conforming. I stand here on behalf of George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, and Trayvon Martin. I stand here on behalf of African American people, but I also stand here with 400 lives of Black lives and Black lives to come. When you are looking at me, you are looking at my ancestors depending on me to give life to their legacy. America stands on the motto, "In God we trust." However, this country has not displayed godly values towards African American people. God will not look down anymore and watch as African American people are mistreated in the land of the free. He put a righteous anger in us to keep agitating for change. From this point, we just act politically, and we must act now with immediate systemic change. We will live peacefully in the land our ancestors built without fear. The same way white privilege is benefited by many, not earned, slavery and our hundreds of years of labor paved the way for African Americans to live free without fear. We will no longer accept a Band-Aid or even a strong antibiotic. We will receive a full cure. That cure is redemption, so that all the needs of African Americans can be met at one time. I now present these solutions to the office of Congressman John Carter to bring forth to Congress in the order of immediate urgency needed to rebuild, especially after all that was lost as a result of the global pandemic. Supply medical and healthcare staff with the appropriate amount of mental health counselors that have a nuanced training of African American mental health issues. Fund local health organizations and campaigns that are actively addressing racial injustice in healthcare, law, and education. Provide equal pay initiatives to ensure that all receive the same pay on a job based on qualifications regardless of ethnicity. Mandate checks and balances in the healthcare system to ensure that all are given the same treatment, while shutting down and investigating any hospital or practices that has unusually high death rates among their Black patients. Immediately remove and retrain police officers known to use excessive force and abuse their power, with harsher penalties for the police with no pardon. Arrest and prosecute police officers and citizens who have murdered and committed hate crimes against Black citizens. Mandate less policing of African American communities, which has been proven to increase crime. Extend the 400 years of African American History Commission Act set to terminate on July 1st, 2020, with an all African American committee being assigned. Re-educate American citizens to dismantle anti-Black rhetoric using the 400 years of African American History Commission Act to head this reform. Provide African American senior citizens with automatic pension as a reward for their tumultuous labor while living through Jim Crow and civil rights movements. Provide monetary reparations to all families of slaves and return property, artifacts, and goods owned to our families. Provide free DNA tests to determine our lineage and begin the repair of our relationship with our ancestors' motherland, Africa, with a program provided to African Americans similar to Birthright Israel. Pardon wrongfully accused Black inmates and nonviolent Black inmates, especially for selling drugs that are now legal in some states, while ensuring their safe transition back into society. Provide a free college education to direct descendants of slaves while pardoning the college loans of college graduates who are direct descendants of slaves. Federally mandate education curriculum nationally to dismantle white communities having the benefit of an advanced curriculum. Restructure senior staff of corporations to ensure African Americans have representation in senior roles. And finally, the United States government must urge European nations to provide reparations to their former African colonies, just as the United States government urged Germany to give reparations to the Jewish. Furthermore, Black women have dedicated more time and labor to the American workforce than every other race or ethnicity. We will no longer be the least paid or 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than any other race. We will be protected and treated with dignity by the workforce and healthcare system. We will be healthy, flourishing women giving birth to healthy, flourishing children, which is the root to building stronger communities. And we will build. Black men are the fathers most involved with their children of any other race or ethnicity, statistically. Black men will no longer be devalued as only a source of entertainment for their athletic and musical ability, while being mass incarcerated. They will be home with our families, protecting us, being treated with due dignity by law enforcement. This will require the American government to give up some things. The same way we as Black people globally have given up our labor, our lives, and our due justice for 400 years. This is no longer about tweeting your disappointment or writing long statements. We will no longer protect the image of white male privilege. We are taking political action so that no one is ever disappointed again. Lastly, I am willing to use my education, experience, and research to work with legislators, members of Congress, and members of the Senate to bring redemption forward. Just let me know what I must do. It has been 400 years, and it is time to let my people go. Thank you for your time.
Well said and well written.
Thank you.
Very good. If you don't mind, how old are you?
I'm 33. I'll be 34 on June 25th, the end of this month.
You've had some good life experiences, I'm sure. Now, did you grow up in New York? Is that where you were born in, or is
Yes,
that where you spent most of your childhood, or is that where you were born and raised?
Albany, New York. So I've always lived in capital cities.
Okay,
Albany, then DC, then Austin. So I was born and raised there, but my dad is Nigerian. So he took me to Nigeria a lot when I was a child.
right. So you had that experience, okay.
Yes.
And you've been in the Austin area. So you live in Austin right now, currently?
I live in Round Rock. I live in the same district as Congressman.
Oh, okay, in Round Rock. So, no, that's funny because yeah, I used to live in Austin, and I know that's the capital. It's interesting. And then when you get in the rural areas, we have a lot of ties with Austin and what happens there, even though we're outside of it. So it's interesting too. So one of the things that um, Congressman Carter right now, so you know his background. He used to be a district judge for over 20 years. So he is very much so law abiding person. He strongly believes in the law. And one of the reasons why he ran for Congress was he was a judge in New Mexico attending a conference on how to assist domestic family issues. You know, when you have those kind of violent acts against family members, how do you help family members deal through that? So during that conference, when he was up there, unfortunately, that's when the World Trade Center was attacked, and he couldn't fly back home. So he and another attorney that was up there with him, they drove back home. And one of the things that he was really upset about is that anyone could attack, you know, the country that he loved. So he wanted to do something about it. So his friend suggested, well, why don't you run for Congress? And he goes, well, what can I do as a congressman? He says, well, you can enact laws that will punish people that did that. And so that's how he got involved. And throughout his tenure in Congress, he's always held firm to those beliefs that he firmly believes in the Constitution. Everybody has a right to freedoms, justices, to make a living, hardworking, and you have to abide by the law. That's one thing that I want to make sure that everyone that I come into contact to, he's very, very law driven. When we're talking about, he was on Homeland Security, Chairman of Appropriations, and a lot of people couldn't understand why some of the actions that the Appropriations Committee was doing, but he had to explain from a law perspective, we have to fix the law in order to help people through it. In other words, when they were talking about open borders and all that, we have to secure the border, and you'll hear that rhetoric about why they secure the border, and it has to be lawfully done. There's some loopholes in our laws that are affecting all the immigrants. So that's part of what he worked on. So as district director for him, my role is, like I said earlier, is Bell County and Williamson County. I go throughout the district, meet folks. While he's in DC, I'm here meeting folks on his behalf, and then I make sure information gets back to him as well.
Mhm.
And one of the privileges that I've had is establishing a couple of advisory councils. And one of them that I'm proud mostly is the Women's Advisory Council. So what this group does, it's 12. And the reason we keep it at 12 is we want to make sure that it doesn't get watered down with too many people in it. So we want to make sure that the issues that women are facing, they come and they meet with a congressman personally twice a year, and they bring items that for him to consider, things that are happening where we can draw legislation and fix things and try to get those things fixed. Now, the makeup of our Women's Advisory Council is great, and that's what I like about it. Is we have a representation from our district, and when I say from our district is not all Caucasian, it's not all Hispanic, it's not all African American, it's not all Asian. So we have a diverse culture in our district, which makes us stronger. So, in forming that council, I was able to select women from different ethnicities, if you will. But these are business women, moms, wives. So they bring a lot to the table, and I'm proud to say that I think we have 3 out of the 12. There's 3, maybe 4 African American women representing them. One of them is from Killeen. She was a soldier. She's a city councilwoman now. She works with the community, with the veteran community. But again, it's a diverse background. So the reason I'm telling you this is because I think in what your message and what I read, I think it's important that every aspect of and let's just start with our congressional district. We have to start with our district, and then it affects the state, and then it affects the nation, correct? So that's the best way to enact change, enact positive change, if you will, is from that point, from what can we do, you and I as constituents. And I think that's where we start with local government, and then it starts spreading out. So one of the things that I loved is what you're saying is a lot of the issues you touched upon, they need to be brought up to the forefront, like you were saying, in a positive way too. It's something to say, okay, we need to change this. But what he's going to ask for, and this is what I
Mhm.
love about him too, is he's going to, okay, that's fine, you're asking for this, but tell me how you would enact it. How would you make sure that it can be brought out to the forefront? Like have your information there, not just bring. Like I could say, well, I think everybody should get a car.
Mhm.
Okay, what that's great, but what do we do? So there's got to be steps to that. Okay, well, where do we get the cars? How do we pay for the cars? Who gets the cars? So there's got to be a plan in action. So a lot of these advisory councils, what they do is they bring issues, but at the same time, we work with them on, okay, let's work through the process of how we can really enact change. In other words, we're not just going to drop a piece of legislation and it gets no traction because it doesn't do anybody any good. So I think a lot of the items you touched upon, I think a lot of people want to get involved in DC, but they need help from the constituents, especially like yourself, a young African American lady living in the world today, facing these challenges. You have the experiences. How can we do that? And also working with peers in other groups. And again, the thing I like about that group is that some of the items that you mentioned, they might not be just affecting one group of folks, ethnicity. It could be affecting across different groups. And then the dialogue begins on how is it best serve the community. So that's what I love about that group. So um, is that speech, is that the letter that you sent or you're going to send? Is that all inclusive or is that a letter plus that speech that you just read to me?
Yes, I took the most important parts from the letter because I didn't want to speak for like, 10 minutes and bore you. So I have the full letter, and then that is the part that I wanted to just speak to you about so you can get a clear understanding of what I stand for. And
Mhm.
I'm grateful for your response, and I have been rallying people, the people that I do know, but the thing about me is I'm a doer.
Yeah,
So I can rally people, but I'm the one who stands firm on, okay, no matter what happens, I know I'm going to still stand. That's why I mentioned in my last sentence that if you let me know what I need to do, I will do it. I will work with people. I will, the council that you mentioned, the Women's Advisory Council, I'll work with them. I'll work with any other group
yeah,
that you suggest because that is it's not that it just started now for me, but I realized in this time that this is the best time to use what I have and what has been in me since I was a kid, honestly.
correct. And one of the things that it's unfortunate nowadays, and to be quite honest and transparent, because that's how I am, is when I and I've lived in my community since '91. I've been here, so I've visited with a lot of folks and church and otherwise. My wife always complains. She says, "Well, you make a friend out of anybody. You could be at HEB, start talking to someone." Well, that's our community, right? That's how you get to know people. So one of the things that I always was not hesitant but careful with, like when I bring these ideas to him, is okay. First of all, I want to make sure that we're listening to our constituents and that we want to impact change in a meaningful way. So starting that women's advisory group, when we talk to each other, when I was talking to him about the idea, the thing that I don't want this to turn into where people from the outside can see is, okay, well, Congressman Carter is just making sure that politically he's affecting or making it uh, partisan, if you will, or political, if you will. And it's very difficult because again, he is a Caucasian man, right? So
Mhm.
people will see that, okay. But the thing that you need to realize that when I tell people, when I say you, that I'm talking about the people, when I talk to them, is like, in order to enact change, if he's our congressman, he's got to work for us. And then that's why we represent each other that way. So it's very important that we have each demographic of our district represented so that everybody has a voice when they're communicating with him. And it doesn't seem like if I was to start an all Hispanic women's group, an all African American women's group, how would the public perceive that, right? So what I like to do is I wanted to bring everybody in the fold so each person could have their voice and be heard about their community. Because what affects the African American community might affect the Hispanic community in a different way, right? Though we have a lot of similarities, but there might be some different drivers, and we want to make sure we understand what those drivers are.
Well, the
And
difference for me, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm
no,
sorry.
go ahead.
The difference for me is really just our history in this country. I think, many groups are affected, and non-white male groups are affected, hands
Mhm.
down. But we have a 400-year history of slavery that just affects us so differently because what we're seeing now has never been different in 400 years. We're just
Right.
recording it now. We just have cameras now, and for me, in my experience, I find that there are other groups who do represent themselves and they don't stand up for us the way we stand up for them. So a lot of times when Black people are bringing forth change, we're told to incorporate everyone. But other groups, and I've experienced this myself,
Mhm.
will exclude everybody but them. They make sure that they're taken care of first. And, I don't know your faith, but when God told us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, we have to get a point to loving ourselves before we exude all this love to everyone. Because what happens is, and I'll give you an example, when I lived in Washington, D.C., there was a women's march. Oh, no, it was called the March for Black Women. But the majority of white women came and started being aggressive in a way where they took over what us as Black women were trying to get across. So
Right.
specifically, a South African woman and I started a chant, and all the white women, I remember, because all the Black women had started leaving because the white women came and took over. But they turned around at us and laughed at what we were chanting, two of us. And then I promise you, 2 minutes later, the lady who mainly laughed, took what we said, added a word, and then had everybody chanting it. So that's what I don't want. I don't want us to keep being so inclusive that we forget everything that's happened to us. Because,
Correct.
as I said, as a Black woman, this is statistically, we've given more to the workforce because of the destruction of our families. We've had to be the face of our families. So we've given to the workforce. We're getting, these jobs. We're getting college education. But
Right.
we're still the least paid. Like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. So I just find that a lot of times when they want us to be so inclusive, it's often to make us forget. And I'm just tired of them robbing us of our right to speak up for ourselves.
Correct. No, and you bring up an excellent point because what I've been watching with my son and my daughter on television when we're watching the protest, my daughter's the one that first, she identified it, and she said, "Dad, when you look at it, I see like 70, 80% of white people, but I don't see that many African American people within the protest." And she goes, "Why is that?" And you bring a good point because I couldn't answer that. I said, "I don't know," but you're. And then I started noticing more often than not, and I think what happens is you lose sight of what the message is. So the protest is to make sure we bring about justice, right, for African American people that were Mr.
Yes,
Floyd, right? That's what it's supposed to be about, but it turns out to be something totally different. Like you said, someone hijacks that protest, that march, whatever it may be, for their own personal gain, which is unfortunate. But I do see that point. And one of the other things I was going to say too is when you were talking right now is that it's so important that as a country, yes, I know we are a country that's made up of different ethnicities, all blended into one tapestry, which is beautiful. But at the same time, you cannot forget your own heritage because your heritage is what makes that fabric strong.
yes,
It cannot be like, oh, well, now it's just a fabric. And even though there's a lot more interracial marriages, relationships, that's okay. That's what we're made of. But I think every person in that relationship should be proud of their heritage and to make sure that their heritage gets passed along to their children,
yes,
regardless if their children are made up of now interracial but that's what makes it so beautiful is that our culture, the American culture, is now made up of so many different wonderful fabrics that we should not lose exactly that what you said, or step aside and say, okay, because I do believe in what you just said about love your neighbor, but you're absolutely right. You cannot love your neighbor until you love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to love your neighbor. I don't
Right.
care what anybody says, or if you just say, yeah, I do love my neighbor. It's like, well, do you love yourself first of all? Are you happy with who you are and what you're doing and all that? So it's an excellent point. Um, so no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think, and I want to commend you on what you're doing, because I think it's very important, especially you with your background and your studies. It's easier for you to articulate it and to explain to somebody else that may have not seen that point of view. But I think it's only going to make us stronger. And it's not necessarily that you're going to say, okay, well, my heritage is the one that's going to lead all. It's very important to understand every heritage. And I think as a people, we need to be not only accepting, but willing to understand. How can you love someone that you don't really understand unless you immerse yourself in their culture and get to understand? And it doesn't have to be by just reading. It's more interacting with someone and having the ability to ask questions that are not going to be negative and respectful. But I always find it, to me, it's fascinating to learn about people, and that's why I've always been this way.
Hmm.
Is I want to learn about your family, your you know, who your husband, wife, the kids, what's your makeup, because everybody has a story to tell. You have a story to tell. Your parents have a story to tell of what brought you here, how you ended up here. But in order to understand your story, you have to understand your history. And if you don't understand history, it's like I'll never understand who you are as a
Hmm.
person. So it's very important on everybody. And I think that's where we have a difficulty. Everybody does it. I don't know if it doesn't want to take, they don't want to take time, because it is time consuming, but at the same time, it's so rewarding when you get to meet someone and understand their heritage, what makes them who they are. It just brings out, I just think I'm fascinated by it. So,
I am
uh,
too. I'm the same way. Most people who know me know that I'm always interested in everybody's culture. Like if I meet an Asian or something, I'm asking them questions about their culture. It's not so much like ups, some people meet people and then they're infatuated with a certain culture. I'm just interested in people because I do love myself, and then I work to love my neighbor as I love myself. So I want to learn as much as about you, but I also want you to learn about me and not assume. In my life, I've come across people who just assume, oh, your dad grew up in Africa. Oh, man, and he was poor. No, he wasn't actually. He wasn't poor. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
it's like, let me educate you on the vast culture of my people, and even me with a Nigerian dad and African American mom, knowing my history on both sides, because
Mhm.
that's just who I am. I'm a historian. But going to Namibia and teaching in the in the southern part of Africa that used to be a part of South Africa under apartheid, and understanding that even for myself, all of Africa is not the same. Because I went
Mhm.
there with an expectation. Oh, I've been to Nigeria. Oh, I know Africa. You know. Then I
Yeah.
said, wow, this is very, very different. Even the climate when I was there, it was cold. I had to buy a coat. Nigeria,
Yeah.
this will never happen.
You have
So
to.
I get what you mean. It's just about constantly trying to learn to understand people and making yourself better to be well versed in the world, so that whether I'm talking to you as Mr. August Alvarado, or whether I go somewhere in what people may call the hood, I can relate to everybody.
Yeah.
I think you and I are alike in that way. People tell me the same thing. You can go anywhere and just make a friend. I can.
Mm. Which is it is a true, I call it a blessing, because I think we're put in these positions because we have to use the gifts that were given to us and I'm glad that you found them. A lot of people go through life without knowing what their gifts are. What are you supposed to do in your life? And I see it as a positive thing to make sure I connect with everybody. And again, it, it intrigues me, but at the same time, the only way we're going to enact change and acceptance is making sure people see us for who we are, and that don't stereotype us into saying, wow, you're all the same. And when you say you all, it's like, no, we're all different, you know. Um, but don't, and when you see something negative, don't assume that everybody is that way, because that's just a very small portion. And it's your responsibility to get involved, to know that culture, that community. So, and again, not everybody gets an opportunity to engage with different um, cultures, and that's a shame, because I think everybody should, regardless of again, if it's the culture, the religion has a big aspect to it, and it's just a way to understand somebody, and to, if we're all going to live together in our neighbor, just look at your neighborhood. The makeup of the neighborhood is just so different, and
Mhm.
we're fortunate that where we've lived. My children have always grown up with our first neighborhood is they knew there was an African American family, there was a Korean family, there was an Anglo family, there was an Italian family, and but they were fortunate because when they grew up, they didn't know any different. They just knew all the neighbors, you know, Mr. Young, Mr. all of them that way. So we're fortunate in where we live that we have that. We're not in an area where it's all predominantly one ethnic group, and
Mhm.
you're not understanding of the other one. So we're blessed that way, which I'm glad our district is that way, because I think it's very fulfilling for me.
Yeah.
And I could be selfish that way, but it's like it's great. I like it.
No, it's really good. And I only want to say I have the free version, so actually we probably only have like 3 minutes left. But
Okay.
I do want to ask you. Well, I
Yeah.
want to say that I really am here today, and I want to stand up on behalf of African American people. I really do, and that is my passion in life. But what do you suggest to me in this last couple of minutes on how to move forward after this call?
So what I would like is, first of all, if you don't mind, you have my email address, correct? Because
Yes,
I would suggest you send me the letter. Have you mailed it in, or what were your intentions? Were you going to mail it in, or were you going to?
I was going to email because I'm scared of the postman right now.
Yeah, exactly. So what you can do is you could email it to his email address, but go ahead and send me a copy of it, because he gets a lot of emails, so I could get that to him directly. So
Okay.
send me the letter, send me the full version of the speech. He's well read. I mean, this man is well read. He loves it. So I want to get him the whole picture of it.
Okay.
And then also in your speech, if you don't mind, you did so well. Have you had that video? Have you videoed yourself giving that speech, or no? This was
No. Well,
okay.
I
So
practiced this, but yeah.
what I'm going to ask is our community, uh, not community, our communications director, if you're okay with this. What I'd like to ask Emily is, because we've been getting some outreach of what's going on, which is great. But if you're open to it, what I'd like to do is get some of those pieces of information that you read from your speech, and you
Mhm.
work with her and see what we can put in our social media post that would make
Oh.
it that would get it out there as well. So
Mhm.
I'll run that by our chief of staff and Emily, and I think the more that we can share your thoughts and your message, and it's not from us. It could be different from our office saying, hey, our constituents are saying this, but when they see you and they hear your words, it brings life and action to your words. So those are things that I like to do now. And then in moving forward, what I like to do is include you in that women's advisory group, or think about what I just shared with you about that group. And
Okay.
if you feel, because we had this conversation already, the dialogue, if you feel that it would be more impactful if we had a subset of a African American women's group.
Mhm.
I'm okay with that too. Just give me
Okay.
your thoughts about that. Because one thing I do want you to do is I want you to connect you with the ladies that are in our group now.
Okay.
You can talk to them as both women of color to say, okay, this is my thoughts. You guys have been in this. What are you feeling? And you could have a really in-depth conversation with them,
Okay.
because you guys have the same background, the same, who knows, you might have, but I think what I can do is put you in touch with those women. And these women, yeah, they're a little bit older than you, but at the same time, you draw on experiences that's why I asked your age.
Mhm.
I hope you didn't mind, but I want to make sure that when they're these women are 40, they're in their 50s, so you can see and you can share from their experiences too, because maybe it was a little different for them, and maybe having you so eloquently point your topics or your thoughts across, it might help them to really maybe say, hey, I always thought that, but I never felt the strength to bring about that conversation. How do you do it so easily? Anyways, I like to connect you with those women too, but
Awesome.
uh, give it some thoughts, and if you want to, when we have the next one, we could include you in that, so you could go ahead and. But I want to make sure that Congressman gets your letter and your speech, and
Awesome.
then we'll see what we can draw. Let's see what his thoughts are about it, and let's see what because in that speech you have some asks about what you want to happen, and maybe he already has some thoughts, and maybe if our legislative team in DC is working on some things, or we can start working on some things, then we'll connect you with them as well, so we can go from there. So that's something that I like to do. If you're okay, if you're open to it, of course.
Oh, I'm so
If you feel
open and
comfortable,
huh?
feel free to tell me, like, no, I don't, this is what, because I've come across that where people are like, I'm behind the scenes kind of a person, but I don't want to be like in front leading.
I'm in
So
front. I am, listen, when I came to you today, I wanted all of your suggestions and I will take all of them. So you already have a yes from me on everything, but
okay,
I want to start, I'm going to send you that letter, and I'm so very happy to hear your feedback, and I thank you for that feedback. So I'm looking forward to working with you, actually.
absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for taking the courage. And I always say courage because I don't know how people, my whole thing with my kids, with everybody, I say, it's always no until you ask someone like, hey, I want to meet, I want to do this. You need to take that step. If you don't take that step forward, the courage to say, hey, I've been thinking about this. This is not right. I want to do something about it. That's always the hard part. It's easier to talk in we call them the echo chambers. But when you get in the forefront, that's where it takes courage to be in the forefront to say, hey, I want to step and I want to be impactful. So I commend you for that again. I think it's wonderful. And again, I think I've been blessed by meeting you.
I've been blessed by meeting you too.
And hopefully, once all this, it's getting to open up more. So hopefully, when we get back into the office, I'd like to invite you up there so you can come over there and we can continue the dialogue, and maybe. But as soon as I have some feedback, I'll definitely share it with you. And if I could connect you with him and you guys could have a dialogue, I'll do the same thing. But yeah, if you don't mind, let's start there. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And you
Oh,
have
I
my email.
appreciate you.
So if you
Yes,
ever
I have
need,
your email. I don't have his email, but I have yours.
okay, I'll send you his. But if you have, if in the future, if you have anything that we can help you with, don't hesitate. Reach out to me. Yeah, you have my contact number. That's my cell phone, so you can
Okay.
always text me or call me. Feel free. And so I'm gonna say,
Indidi.
what is it?
My name is Indidi Amaka, but most call me Indidi.
Indidi Amaka.
Yes.
Indidi Amaka.
It means patience is a good quality.
Oh wow, great. Okay, awesome. Well, it
Yeah.
was a pleasure meeting you again. Thank you so much. I look forward for the information and our continued talk and dialogue, and let's see what we can do. Absolutely.
Thank you. I
Thank
look forward to it as well. No, thank
you.
you for taking the time with me today.
Absolutely. Stay safe, and wonderful meeting you, and have a great day.
You too. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.